Hi, and welcome to the Org Dev podcast. So each month we invite a guest practitioner who has really great experience of implementing meaningful and significant change in their organization. And we're absolutely delighted that Penny Young has basically accepted our invitation to be our guest this week. And we're going to do a bit of a deep dive into her brilliant experience. But Penny is organization development and effectiveness specialist at the Phoenix Group. It's probably the largest organization you haven't heard of, and there's lots of interesting organizations within the Phoenix Group that will be really interesting to learn more about. And she's got an incredible background that includes really familiar organizations to you, which would include things like Specsavers and Vodafone, and has really been leading sort of transformational change in their organizations and working with their target operating models and really setting them up for success. So with that incredible background, we've invited Penny in to answer some of our questions, just shed a little bit of light. And these sessions are really designed to sort of shed a light on the mysterious world of organization development and uncover what actually goes on as well. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Garen. Good to meet you.
Brilliant. So for those of you, of us that haven't met you, can you just tell us a little bit about your role and what does your role actually involve?
So my current role at the Phoenix Group is to lead org development and effectiveness approach methodology. I was brought in to build a process, really, an org talent review process that the CAV had been trying to implement for probably about 18 months before I joined. And I joined in March, and we've just run our second review meeting. So I've been brought in to look at how we connect talent with organisation effectiveness and to start the conversation, particularly with ExCo members and leadership teams, about how is their organisation shaped up and have we got the right talent in the right place to deliver our strategy and do the work we need to do. I've also been building toolkits and capabilities, so working with the HR team about how we develop their capability to do this really well. And I've also been looking at how we work with the ExCo, not just in doing the org talent review process, but starting to get their thinking around organisation as a whole and embed their new operating model. So I work within a small CV. There's 3 of us, and I'm kind of the glue between the 2 leads who drive the change and lead those conversations. And I'm in there thinking about, how do we hang it together? What tools do we need? What's the next thing coming on the journey? So yeah, I'm really loving my time at Phoenix. It's a really interesting organisation to work within. I've not been in financial services before, so it's my first foray into financial services, and I think it is quite different to the other industries I've been in, but it's quite a purpose-driven organisation. In fact, very purpose-driven, and has quite a, I guess, not aggressive agenda, but a really ambitious agenda to try and enable people to have better life opportunities. So that purpose-driven sense really sort of aligns with my values too. So I feel really fortunate to have landed in this organisation and do what I love.
And just to sort of help people understand, so sort of size and scale, like what makes up Phoenix Group?
So it's about 10,000 employees. If you also include our managed service providers, so our customer service element is sort of a hybrid of in-source and outsource. We've got big brands like Standard Life, Sun Life for Canada, Reassure. So Phoenix own those businesses, and at its heart, it's an asset management and pensions and savings organisation. So yeah, we've got about 10,000 people across the whole of the UK. We've also got a European arm. We've got some employees in Republic of Ireland and in Germany and Austria. And we have a small team in Bermuda as well.
Great. Hopefully you get a chance to go out there and meet them at some point.
Yes, we're pushing into the international field, put it that way.
Brilliant. And what's really useful for me, because you're talking about organization development, organization effectiveness, you're talking about helping shape the target operating model and bring it to life. I think it's really useful for people to sort of share their career to date. Like, how do you find yourself in this role, working with a 10,000 person organization with a global footprint, sort of helping steering it in this way? What's been your career to date, and how do you find yourself where you are now?
Good question. So I started my life, I didn't want to do HR actually, or org development. That wasn't on the trajectory however long ago, 30 years ago when I graduated. I was interested in psychology and development more of adolescence. And I really didn't, so I started doing teacher training and didn't enjoy it. I just thought, this isn't for me, because at that point in time, you needed to do teacher training to do educational psychology, which was where I was heading. So in that development space, but not in education. And I basically landed in a job in Vodafone as a temp at a time in the HR team, in a time where Vodafone was quite small. We're talking mid-90s. And they didn't have any graduate schemes other than their engineering scheme. And I was really fortunate because I joined in the HR team. I just graduated, and I helped develop basically the graduate recruitment and development scheme for marketing, HR, finance, and then basically ended up in a role in HR, and was a business partner, or old school business partner back in the day when it was personnel, for a good number of years, and went on the journey with Vodafone as it was acquiring lots of organisations and integrating organisations and being within the kind of business partner space at the front end of all of that integration. And as at the time, the Ulrich model was becoming, the new thing on the block. And I was fortunate enough to be part of how we transformed the HR team into the C of E's and the business partnering team. And I then moved into more of the one of the C of E's, which at the time was org design and change, and kind of went on that journey through a process of, we were doing a big a transformation program. So Vodafone was moving into its new HQ. So it was consolidating, integrating, moving location, trying to get one culture. The brand had aligned into the brand that it is today. And really, I was quite lucky to be part of that program, and I did a lot of work in behaviour change. I went into the leadership management development team for a short time, sort of seconded in, and worked on a big cultural change program, and in that learned a lot about how to land those programs really well, and set them up in a way that isn't just focused on one thing, i.e. behaviour or org design, or all the irritants that you get in an organisation, or how you knit it together, or your people practices. It was looking at it all. And that allowed me really to go, actually, I do want to do this and stay within org design and change. And was in that C of E for probably 8 years in terms of the time at Vodafone. As Vodafone morphed, I was doing work with restructuring, then more culture builds, building toolkits around team effectiveness. So I got a really good grounding in all things org development, org design, org effectiveness.
And this is an unprecedented time, isn't it? This was an entire new industry was being formed, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And what was it actually like to be in an organization that was at the vanguard of this change, where it's growing, merging, entering new markets?
It was exciting. I mean, I was in the UK business, but obviously there was a global business buying up countries. And in the UK business, because that was, I guess, its origin, we were involved in, Egypt, Kenya, purchasing all of those and thinking about them being integrated. So really exciting, lots of, I guess, entrepreneurial kind of spirit in terms of pioneer, go and do something, come back and transfer it. And that kind of, even though I didn't go to those countries, we were in the back office doing the support work, which was really exciting. And then from a UK perspective, as things became more online, let's call it that, I remember doing the online OD piece of work, and shifting and integrating from Blackberries to good old Blackberries back in the day, and the whole device management, and acquiring more customer front end organisations and the retail part, because Vodafone at its heart was more network, and then we're starting to bring in the customer retail and integrating all of that, and that was also really exciting. How you kind of shift your organisation to being more customer centric, and the challenges that the board had. So the challenges that particularly the UK board had from shifting to being quite technical to customer retail focused, and bringing all of those parts together you would expect in an operating model, with the overlay then and the dynamic of a group organisation that is starting to shift a lot of its functions into a group space. So lots of different dynamics playing out, lots of exciting times trying out new things. It felt like we were quite leading edge in some of our org design thinking. We did quite a lot of work with Tesco's in learning and thinking about how they were doing org effectiveness at the time. And also at that time, there wasn't an awful lot of kind of professional development to do OD. I remember thinking, let me look at the CIPD, and there wasn't anything then to teach you how to do it. So we were learning as we were going, and the team I was in, we worked in partnership with a really small OD consultancy, and they were really part of our team for a number of years, where we were growing and learning together, which was really a really useful model actually to have when you're thinking about how you build capabilities, you move forward. And that's kind of stuck with me in all the jobs I've been in, keeping that outside in view, particularly when you don't necessarily always have the courses to go on. I mean, there's so many more now, and there's masters, and there's all sorts you can do, but at that time there wasn't. So it was about learning as you were going and experiencing new things and just having a go, really.
Amazing. And then so you left Vodafone, and then where did you go after that?
Yeah, so I left Vodafone about 15 years ago, 2009, so 14 years ago. And I left to set up my own business. So I thought, I have been an internal consultant for a long time. I need to explore and experience other organisations. So I set up my own business. I'm really fortunate through contacts that I'd made, having been a big organisation for a while. I did a lot of project work with other organisations in the sort of org design or people change space. So from there, I went to Opus Trust, which was really fascinating, working with an entrepreneurial organisation that support charities. I worked for a while at Unipart Automotive, did some employee experience work and then a bit of restructuring. I moved to Virgin Media and headed up leadership development there. So I got real insight into lots of different organisations, and then landed in Specsavers, where I went for a 6-week piece of kind of OD diagnostic piece of work on their technology, their IT team, and ended up staying for about 9 years in the end, both as an external consultant, supporting them setting up their approach to OD and org effectiveness, and supporting them on particular projects, and then became a permanent member of their team. And worked with them on their target operating model, worked with them particularly in their regions. So they've got they've actually got 4 regions now, but when I was there, working with their Northern European boards and Australian boards on really looking at how they ready themselves for their next wave of strategy. And when I became permanent there, actually, again, it was a time of, there's quite a few new members on the board, looking at the new brand promise, looking at the new values, bringing in new technical lead. So there was a lot going on, and a different approach to their eye health strategy. So again, I was there supporting on how they implement that model, and then left there just after COVID. So COVID hit, and I was really looking for something different, and I went to work at Sky to head up their org effectiveness and change team, which was a group role across Italy, Germany and the UK, and to support them implementing their new operating model that had been defined about 2 years previously. And that was an interesting foray into probably a media organisation, not being fully media orientated, and in I guess an area where I was connected. So I had a much bigger team, and a team that wasn't necessarily my own. So working across a matrix with very different approaches. So how do you get a similar one way of doing OD across 3 regions or 3 territories? And then left there this year and joined Phoenix.
Fantastic. Do you mind to ask one question there as well? You may or may not have a defined answer for this, but like just your description of it is really useful. Is you use the word operating model and target operating model.
Yeah.
What is your description of that? Because obviously one of the things we're always inviting people to do is to engage with it. But from your perspective, what is it?
It's a really good question, and every organisation I've been in, you have to define it, as in you need to connect with that organisation and go, what does it mean for this organisation? But in my head, I like to use the term, it is all of the levers that you pull to enable you to get from your strategy to delivery, to your operation. And it's the method and model in which you can get to that end point. I would say you start with your strategy and your target operating model. So at Specsavers, when we asked this question of a number of leaders, what would define our target operating model? And we, in simple terms, did a bit of Simon Sinek actually, and said, actually, it's the why, it's the how and the what. And we looked at the things around the how, which was the purpose of the organisation, the vision of the organisation, and the strategy is the kind of the why. The how, in terms of the delivery around your people, your organisation, your culture, your capabilities, and then the what becomes your technology, your processes, your data, and your systems. And that was how we kind of modelled target operating model. How you translate that into org design and development, for me, is the next step. So if you can imagine you've got a blueprint and a roadmap of your 3 parts, the why, the how and the what, obviously your org model sits in your how. And your org model in the broadest sense is around 3 things in my head. Your org design, so your structures, your roles, how you organise the work, your KPIs, your governance. Then your capabilities around your leadership, your skills and your knowledge, and then your culture around the behaviours that you have in the organisation, the rituals, the ways of working, how you hang it all together, including your decision making. That probably comes in your cultural aspect. So in short, operating model is the whole, and then where I like to focus is then on the org model and how you land that to connect it with people strategy.
I'm very glad I asked. That's one of the best definitions I've heard yet.
Oh, okay.
That's really good and really clear. And we'll go into a little bit more detail, because obviously these podcasts are about sort of just demystifying what do we do day to day, and what does the work look like. But do you find that different organizations have a different level of maturity about this? So some will have a clearly defined target operating model. Some will say, what is a target operating model when you begin? Like, do organizations have different approaches to it?
Yes, they do. So some organizations think they have a target operating model and they possibly don't. They might have a structure.
Okay.
And a blueprint and how their systems architecture hangs together, which is fine, because if that works, that works. So I think the maturity thing for me is about the terminology and reference and knowledge that an organisation or a leadership team might have of what operating model constitutes or org design constitutes, through to an organisation that probably has one and has had it a while, I'm just trying to think of an example. Have I been in an organisation that has a blueprinted model? I suppose Sky did very clearly, but again, in a lot of organisations, there's diagrams that hold things together, but it's not then the how you operate. If you then connect behaviours and values, they don't always connect with the diagram or the mechanisms that they've got in place. For me, that's the thing that adds the value, is how you work with an organisation to connect all of the elements that then constitute operating model, and then what the organisation's about. Does that make sense? And I don't think any organisation has got it right, or any organisation has it perfectly, but yeah, there's probably been a number of organisations I've been in where they might have 2 or 3 parts of that jigsaw puzzle and not necessarily connected it all.
Brilliant. And just a follow-up question to that. Again, you may or may not have an example or whatever, but what does an organization that has it all connected, how does that perform compared to an organization that doesn't, and maybe is a little bit more haphazard, where there are different things, the structure, the KPIs, the why, the how, the what isn't quite connected? What is the point of difference there?
So I think, well, obviously there's, I guess, a commercial outcome. I would say that in organisations that I've been in where their purpose is very clear and their model of how they work with their products to deliver the outcome to the customer is the one where obviously their performance is high, and their ability to monitor the organisation's health is greater, is better. In organisations, I think, again, it depends on the maturity and where the organisation's at, is where they will focus most greatly on one of those levers. So in an organisation that is on significant downsizing, for example, the performance might be, well, an outcome might be a cheaper, better performance for shareholders, but your engagement for your employees is far less.
I guess, again, bringing your role to life, if this is possible, what does a typical day or week look like for you?
I'll probably have to define a week, because a day could be, harder to define. So I could be designing a workshop for an intervention that could be, kick-starting a piece of org design in its holistic sense. So not just structure, in its holistic sense. So I could be designing a workshop. I could be getting ready to go and do a stakeholder meeting with a board member to talk to them about how they want to take their organisation forward. I could be having a meeting with an HR business partner and coaching them on a conversation that they're having with their leadership team about a change. I could be meeting an external supplier on, i.e. OrgView, for example, just to think about how we're using the tool more effectively.
An OrgView, that's a organisation development design software, isn't it? That
it is.
Takes a lot of the heavy lifting out. Is that right?
It does. It's an org insight tool and design tool that can help with the front end of your process to really highlight where things are, how your organisation is shaped and sized, all the way through to them measuring and looking at when you've done a piece of OD, has it landed? So yeah, so I could be meeting them and working with them on, are we going to implement an activity analysis in a particular area, thinking about our insight pack that we're going to put forward to the board to highlight what we're doing on our org talent review process. I could be writing a board paper. I could be researching externally a piece of latest thinking, which I do quite enjoy. I could be reading a book. I'm reading Emergent at the moment about systemic approach to M&A. So I could be doing things like that and thinking about how that then might translate into our thinking and strategy for a board paper, for example. I could be running an OD workshop capability build for our business partners. I could be writing a new tool and putting it into an online toolkit. All of, any of those things. I could be doing a podcast on
Paying all that
Again,
knowledge forward.
yeah, and I, basically getting out. I could be going in and meeting various people in the business, or could just be doing a bit of research as well. So it's so varied. It's what I love. I mean, I love the way that you can go in and facilitate a workshop with a small number, have a one-to-one and coach a leader through to doing some thinking and creating something that's then something there for perpetuity, in perpetuity. So a toolkit or whatever. So yeah.
Wow, it sounds like variety is a key element here. What
Yeah.
what do you enjoy most about your role? Because there's lots of different activities there. Some highly technical,
Yeah.
some very highly facilitative. Like, what is it you enjoy most about it?
I think it's creating conversation, creating connections, moving organizations forward, helping others make sense of something that is quite complex or tangled. I think our job is about connecting the dots and decoupling things that shouldn't be necessarily together sometimes. So I enjoy getting in the heart and really getting into the nub of what's really going on and how can we help the organization solve its own problems, not just solve the problems for them, but help them. So that's what I enjoy. And anything that is factual and insight driven that sits around that really helps. So I enjoy playing with the kind of science or the facts and the heart driven human side. That blend is what I love the most about what I do.
Mm. And you said that one of the things you talked about was holistic organization design versus just
Yeah.
vanilla organization design. Is that what you mean by holistic organization
Yeah.
design? Where you're starting to engage with people and help them make sense of what's going on. What's your
Yeah.
definition of that?
Well, it's probably got two prongs. So holistic for me is obviously looking at the organization as a whole. So it's as a system in all its facets. So org, culture, capability, they're my kind of three go-tos. So you can't just design structure, you have to design how it's going to connect and the ways in which you're going to connect it and the skills you need or capabilities you need to connect. So that's what I mean by holistic. And then the second prong is for me around, sometimes you have to do it in a darkened room, but for me, it's about engaging as many people in the process of doing org design and development, which enables it to land. Because in my experience, the only way you can get change to land is for human beings to be in part of that change and to be involved in it and to bring their thinking to it. Whether that's from a leadership perspective, getting leaders working together through to a bottom-up, appreciative inquiry, employees involved in their thinking and bringing it to the party. So that's the second part when I talk about holistic.
Wonderful. And you talk about sort of capabilities, and you talk about sort of developing the capabilities that the organization needs. How do you go about doing that? Like, because there's lots of different capabilities you can develop. What is a way of actually having an understanding of, okay, we need to develop these particular capabilities to deliver this particular strategy?
So for me, organizational capabilities come from the strategy itself. So what are the things that we're focusing on to deliver? And therefore, what are the differentiators that this particular organization needs to make that change? So it will be different in different organizations. And also, I guess there's also the fundamental capabilities that everyone's talking about: digital, data, how we're moving forward into whatever generation we are of technology. So we platform-based thinking. So what capabilities does the organization need? And then how do you segment that and translate that into human capabilities? And interestingly, what's our role in AI and all of that? So there's all the kind of progressive thinking around capabilities, and then there's what does each organization need to develop or deliver their strategy. For example, in financial services, it will be quite different to a media organization, but there will be some common themes across the bottom. So that's what I mean, and capabilities in its broadest sense. So technical, people, data, they all have to, process, they all have to come together in terms of all capabilities, but our focal point is the human aspect.
Excellent, thank you. One of the elements you do is like organisation design. We had Fiona McLean on from the DWP, and she described organisation design as not for the faint of heart. So I don't know if you agree with that or not, but what do you find most challenging about your very varied role that you have?
Yeah, I think there's a perception it's a bit of a dark art. And I think it's people's perceptions of what it is that actually, because that's not true, really. It's people can see it as something that could be quite negative, rather than the positive that it can bring, which is about growth and change and moving forward. I guess the biggest challenge that I've got is, I guess people's view of it and how they've experienced it in the past, and how you can shift mindset to show that it is, quite a critical thing. It's a critical component part of any organisation, translating strategy into people strategy. I mean, you need it. You need that cog. I think some of the biggest challenges are how you bring people along the journey. So when you might start a piece of OD, and a leader's got a view in their mind about what the outcome already is, which is usually the case, and how you kind of unknit it and sort of roll them back to, well, what is it why are you doing this, and what is it you're trying to achieve? And then so bringing them along the journey and shifting their mindset, and then also them bringing the organisation, their team, on the journey. I think that's the biggest challenge. Another quite controversial challenge, I would say, is also your HR team and where they're at in their thinking and maturity about how involved they are in organisation design, in a positive way. Sometimes HR, when I'm partnering with HR professionals, directors, whatever, they know exactly how the organisation and their leaders work, but sometimes that can be a barrier. But it can also be really positive, as in a barrier in the sense of, because they're so connected to the organisation, they don't always see some of the things that are in front of them. And so that's another challenge as an OD practitioner, to not just bring the leader on the journey, but your business partner and your HR colleagues as well. So that can be a challenge. I guess other ones are knee-jerk. So organisations that are knee-jerk and not thinking about sustainable change. So quick, we need to do this thing. And COVID, I know that we had to go back to basics a lot of the time. But actually, now we think about where we are with COVID. Did we need to be as knee-jerk? So that, again, that's some of the challenges. Thinking in the moment versus the medium to longer term, I think, can be a challenge.
Which I guess makes you ideally placed to help people be more objective, isn't it? What are some of the things that you would use to help take someone on that journey? So maybe they don't see the world the way that you do because you've got all this holistic view. Like, what would be some of the things that you could potentially do or others could do to help take their stakeholders on the journey?
Yeah, so I think it's doing it with them, as in helping them shape their thinking. And I know from experience, I know particularly at Specsavers, the leadership team wanted to do something in a certain way. They had an answer, so I went with it. Okay, we'll do it in that way, using your toolkit and going with where they want to go first, which was structure, role design, operating model or ways of working. But actually what they needed was to think about them as a leadership team and how aligned they were to where their strategy was first, and to open them up to the change first. And I suggested that we did that, but they didn't want to do it. So we did it as a secondary thing. And afterwards, one of the directors said, I think we should have done that first, because it would have unlocked. So the tip is, go meet the organisation where it's at, use your toolkit to take them on the journey, work alongside them, suggest as you go new things, but actually, the pay is, do it along the journey, but actually they then realised that actually if you'd done it first, it would have maybe had a different outcome. And that's the win. So next time we did the team opening up first.
For those of you that are watching this, that Penny is sharing insights that are really rich. So really take these tips on board, because you have to learn a lot of painful lessons to get to that point as well. And I guess you're also sort of describing the fact that it's the big thing about OD. It's not about your ego, is it? It's about them making the change, and just seeing them make that change is the payback to you in itself, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's not about you being front and center of the change, is it?
totally. No, it's their change, and my philosophy is that you leave the organisation, whether in a permanent role or an external consultant, being able to do it themselves next time, or certain element that they can take to repeat and learn, how to do it better. And a measure of success for me is hearing the playback of leaders who are then saying things that you might have said to them a few weeks or months or even years before, playing that back to them, and you go, oh, so that did land then. And that's a great measure, I think, of what you've done as a human being intervening in their organization. So it wasn't about me, it was about what they needed to deliver. So yeah.
Fascinating. That's fascinating. And that kind of sort of moves on to the next question, which is, what kind of impacts have you seen from your efforts? There's certain elements of organization development which are really difficult to measure. Like, how can you attribute what you've done to the bottom line of the organization, because there's just so many variables, and often organization development is a facilitative role.
Mm-hmm.
But what kind of impacts have you seen from your efforts that you're like really proud of, or even outputs and outcomes that you've seen?
So I think it's never what you've done is the outcome for success. It's you have a part to play. You're like on the stage playing the part with the actors in whatever project you're in. I guess examples are enabling a country to be able to actually trade. So this was at Specsavers. One of the countries was struggling, and their competitive landscape was a lot more digital and we weren't. So really being able to support the region in looking at all of their regional aspects and putting an org effectiveness approach on the table for them to have a conversation about, well, how can we all focus something, so give up something to invest in that country for them to become successful. So being part of that conversation, facilitating those conversations, and then seeing an outcome where they're now, hugely profitable. They are number 2 in terms of competitors in their country. So from being bottom to number 2, through to being in a great place to work, one of the greatest organizations to work for in the Netherlands. So from an engagement perspective. So it wasn't me that did that, but we had a part to play, me and the HR director, in those conversations to get the business to that point. So there's some of the examples, I think, that
It sounds like it's the role of catalyst.
Positive disruptor, I like to call it.
Well, I like that. That's the phrase for the day. Positive disruptor, because there is bad disruption as well, isn't there?
Distraction, disruption.
Brilliant. No, thank you. And you have to account for your work, obviously, because you are potential cost to the business. Like, how do you measure success in your role? Like, how are you accountable to people more senior for you, or whatever? Like, how is that measured?
So I'm measured on my objectives and delivering my objectives, which in this role have been about building toolkits, take capability in its broadest sense. So the process to get org talent review as a thing into the organization, building new muscle. So for me, the feedback from the leaders that have been involved in that, feedback from the exco, the CEO, and our HRD in how the conversations have matured. So where we've put org talent review into the system, how those conversations have matured and awareness has grown of what's happening in the organisation. Feedback from my HR business partner colleagues. And for me, a test is people coming to you and going, what do you think? Can you help with? Have you got an idea on? So for me, the feedback loop back round where you're not pushing, people are pulling from you. For me, I know that I'm doing a good job if it's, people are now wanting to use the products that we're offering and can see the value it's adding. So yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. And we all learn lessons along the way.
Yeah.
Some from our great experiences and some from sometimes setbacks. What are for you some of the biggest lessons that you've learned along the way?
Knowing when to stop, knowing when to not push. Quite so hard. When you're passionate about something, and that this could be the right thing to do, but other people don't see it, just knowing when not to keep going at it, because it won't land, will it? I mean, so that just comes with experiences of understanding the leadership team you're working with, understanding the organization and the culture, knowing what tools to work and so I think that, and not getting too sucked in, so keeping your distance, so keeping connected but keeping outside, because our role is to positive disruptor, to challenge what people can see or can't see, and making that visible. So definite learning is to be able to still stay outside and not get too drawn in, and making it kind of your mission.
It's so easy to become entangled in a system, isn't it? And that's always the internal challenge of OD as well.
Yeah, and to keep still. I know that sounds so. Whilst everything's swirling, keeping still. So not getting it's a bit like not getting sucked in, but not to be drawn or moved in different directions. But to stay in what you know is the right thing to do for the organisation, and not get swayed. That's another learning.
Wow, that's amazing. And a lot of people watch this. We did a session at London School of Economics the other day, and we had like 85 would-be organization development practitioners in there, all studying their postgraduate masters and that, all keen to get in. And that's just one uni. There's a real, it feels like OD's really becoming a profession of choice now. What advice would you give to someone just considering a career in organization design or development or effectiveness?
What advice would I give them? Know what you're good at. So know what you're passionate about, because the subject and topic is so broad. Know really what excites you within that broad spectrum, and what strengths you bring, and apply that. Again, not with caution, but apply. Really focus on that and apply that, and think about how you can bring that to different organisations. I think it is helpful to go into an organisation and understand change. I guess the question is, do you consult externally or do you go internally? And I think get a good mixture of the two, and think about different types of industries that you can work within, because it is the experiences of different places and projects that will build your toolkit and your experience. And you'll know if you prefer more technical org design to facilitated sessions, but learn your style and what works and apply that. That would be my
Brilliant advice. Thanks, Penny. And then we just had because you and I had one conversation as preparation for this as well. And you sort of said that it's about not necessarily getting too hung up on the terms, wasn't it? So in one organization, you actually had an org development role, but the organization wasn't ready to call it organization development. So you changed the name to fit the context. So it's not necessarily about having that title. It's more about doing the work, isn't it?
It is. It's about the stuff that you do. And what's going to land, so the language that will land in the organization. So if you know what you bring as the technical expert, simplify it or align it to what will work in the organization from a language perspective and what you do and what you deliver. So yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time, Penny. I really appreciate it. People watching this will have got so much value from it. You've really sort of not only just sort of given us more of an understanding of what org development and org design as well is, but also like how do you navigate these complex organizations upon which we work, and really getting into the nitty gritty as well. So I just want to say a huge thank you and thanks for preparing for this session as well. I hope everyone's found this really, really useful. So thank you, Penny. I'm really appreciative.
No, thank you, Garen.